Well, hi everyone. I've got 10 o'clock. Appreciate y'all being here. My name is Guerra. I hope I don't blow this microphone out. I really don't need it, I promise you. But I'm excited to get to talk with you today because Accelerator KMS is a solution that I'm a strong believer in. I'm very passionate about. I'll tell you a little bit about my journey, but hopefully be able to connect some of the dots for you of how Accelerator KMS and EAM can coexist, and not only coexist, but also have a really, cohesive, beneficial relationship with one another. So with that said, let me figure out how we're doing here. All right, this is what you can expect in the session. I'm going to give a brief introduction. I'm going to talk a little bit about why procedural transformation. I'm going to talk about Accelerator KMS as a solution. I'm going to share a little bit about the end user journey and then talk about some of the authoring and administration features and functionality of AKMS. So with that said, a little bit about me. If you've ever heard me talk before, you know that I spent most of my adult life as a police officer. I have 15 years of police service. That's what my background is in. I'm very proud of my police service. Gave a lot of my body and mind to that career that I can never get back. But with that said, how this relates to this topic is after I left law enforcement, I went to work in the chemical industry. I became a field operator. I was out there turning valves, doing all that. Before I came to work for Hexagon. So I've spent my entire life really operating by either general orders in law enforcement, which general orders were a body of knowledge that gave you a framework for how you needed to think about your decision making. There were certain things you had to do very prescriptively, but you had to apply those scenarios within ever-changing, environments and variables, right? Whenever I went into the chemical industry, I found that, oh wow, the work I'm doing is much more prescriptive, it's repeatable, there are far less variables to deal with as I'm doing this. But point is, I have pretty much operated my entire life by some type of procedure or some type of guideline. So I'm a strong believer in it. I believe that it promotes and creates safe environments. I believe that it helps to remove and reduce ambiguity in work process, especially in work process where it's repeatable, right? You don't have to have that same level of risk and ambiguity in the process with well-defined procedures. So again, like I said, my background is I went and I worked for a chemical plant. I actually worked for Invista. And out there at Invista, my background is in training and education. I trained police officers, I trained citizens. It wasn't long before I changed careers. I went out, I started learning it from the ground up, that I found, hey, there's a real need for training here. So my training experience found me once again. And I was kind of going off of the way that I was trained. And what I've often found was people would tell me, all right, Chris, I'm going to show you what the procedure says, and then I'm going to show you how we actually do it, all right? And that's a problem, okay? Does that sound familiar to anybody out here? And that scared me a little bit. I'm like, wait, what do you mean? You're gonna tell me, isn't the procedure supposed to be the source of truth? Isn't this like the Bible out here is what I'm supposed to be following, along the way? But the problem was we had a very dated, paper-based, antiquated procedural process, and a lot of people had grown to distrust the procedural process because of a lot of the overhead that was involved with it. So when I started, training people, I was like, okay, the first thing we got to do is we got to fix the trust issue with our procedures. But I also had a vision. We could take procedures, which are supposed to be the source of truth for how to perform a job out in the field. We could take those procedures and we could enhance them with visual media, things like images and little GIFs and short video clips, right? So maybe that black and white text on a page, we're going to make it as clear and easy to understand as possible, but still, if you can add in an image or you can add in something that kind of demonstrates exactly what you're trying to describe, it just removes another layer of ambiguity in the whole process. So this was my vision. So I was looking for a solution. I was like, man, what possible solution out there could help us fix our procedural problems and also potentially enhance them to become powerful training tools? I ran across a little program called Accelerator KMS. So as a customer, I actually led the implementation of Accelerator KMS for the site that I worked for. So when I'm up here and I'm excitedly talking to you about this is coming from the perspective of somebody who went through the vetting process of looking at all of the possibilities of what I could use, and I landed on AKMS being the best. I implemented it, used it at a site, and I still believe it's the best today. All right? So that's my perspective on it. So if you've ever heard me speak before, which I don't recognize too many people in the room, you know that I like to lead a conversation with a series of questions. So my first question is this: what is the average tenure of your current line level workforce? Anybody in years? What do you think the average tenure is? 3 years? What else? 5, 10? Oh, 10? You're doing pretty dang good if you got 10-year average tenure. All right. 3, 5. Anybody else? 7? All right, good. So everybody who said anything other than 3 is wrong. Sorry, but no. That's correct for yours. The industry average, though, is actually less than 3 years now of line level employment. And this comes into play because whenever you think about that, like, how does that make you feel? Depending on what kind of industry you're in, right? You've got people out there who are operating, heavy equipment, right? Critical assets and everything, and they may have, 3 to 10 years experience, but with most of them likely having less than 3 years. Does that make you feel great? Does it make you feel confident in the work processes taking place out there? It doesn't make me, especially because, like I say, I was trained and I saw the way that people get trained and the way that knowledge is transferred, It didn't make me feel very good. Another question for you. There's no wrong answers here except for the ones that I say are wrong after you've answered them. What do you see in this image? Somebody just shout it out. What do you see? Assets. What kind of assets? Pumps, motors. What else do you see? What was that? Pipeline. They're very clean. Yes, you're right. Oh, you see a lot of risk. Oh, see, somebody's starting to think in the directionality that this conversation's going, right? Because that's also what I see. A lot of people named a lot of different assets and equipment that you recognize and everything. But whenever I look at this image, what I see is people. I see a system that no matter how much we try to move towards this digital reality, right, that's going to create efficiencies and automation for us and everything, no matter what, at the end of the day, we still work in processes that require human intervention. Would y'all agree with me on that? Okay, anytime you introduce the human element, what else do you introduce? Risk, right? Risk. Okay, who in here is perfect? Eric? Besides you. That's my colleague, Eric Young. No one's perfect, right? And if anybody does say you're perfect, I'm going to find out who your significant other is, and I'm going to go tell them so that they can get a good hearty laugh, right? None of us are perfect. We're all fallible. That is human nature. So with that in mind, anytime that we see these assets, we see this equipment, remember there's always that human component that also, just as importantly, as the excellence that y'all use to manage your assets, you should also be applying the same level of excellence to manage human performance. You agree with me on that? This is where Accelerator KMS comes in. So, let me ask you this. In your opinion, what is most important? Well-maintained equipment or a competent workforce? They're both important. It's a trick question, right? We can all agree. You're here, right? Asset integrity, right? That's why you're here, right? We all agree that if you don't properly manage and maintain your assets, what'll happen? They'll fail. The system will break down and they'll fail. And when they break down and they fail, what's that cost you? Cost you a lot, right? Cost you productivity, potentially if equipment has a catastrophic failure, it could potentially cost you lives, right? We take this seriously. Y'all take this seriously because you've invested in Hexagon EAM. But my question to you is, are you also taking just as seriously that human component that also has a risk of failure? This is where AKMS comes into play. You're all familiar with the digital twin model, right? This is one of my favorite concepts to, really wrap my head around the role that AKMS plays in this. Digital twin, whenever you hear digital twin, you often think of the digital representation of the equipment in the field, right? Would y'all agree with me on that? You see, but there's two sides to this coin. There's two sides to the digital twin. Yes, there's the digital representation of the equipment in the field, but the other side to the coin is the digital representation of the human knowledge required to operate that equipment. You don't have a complete digital twin without managing human performance. And this is where Accelerator comes in. So the problem overview. Oftentimes, I hear people say, well, look, we've got experienced people. They know how to do it. They've done it 1,000 times. Do you want to know where most critical safety incidents, after they do a root cause analysis and find where the breakdown came from, you want to know where most of those actually go back to? Human error. Human error, and many times, I won't give you a 9 times out of 10 or anything, but I'll just say many times, you hear that exact statement of, well, this was an experienced operator, he'd done it a whole bunch of times. So you would think, earlier I led with what's the average tenure of your workforce, right? But in most critical breakdowns, oftentimes it's really experienced people who have done it so many times and they're not actually utilizing a procedure or referencing any kind of documented work process to perform that work. Suddenly, they're doing it because they know it. A new variable comes into play that they weren't expecting, and they make a wrong decision in the moment, right? But if you're actively managing human performance and managing the risk that you interject with humans, you've got a great procedural management system. It's guiding people through that work, and it's helping to reduce risk where you can. So again, how can human performance risk be mitigated? I think y'all all get the answer now, right? It's through a great procedural process. So as I've been learning more about EAM myself and talking to people who are involved with EAM, one of the questions I often hear is, well, EAM has checklists, why would I need Accelerator KMS, right? And the best way that I've been able to wrap my mind around this is EAM is the what, AKMS is the how. So in EAM, imagine this, you've got checklists and stuff that are describing the tasks that need to be performed in order to ensure that you're maintaining an accurate maintenance schedule and everything like that, right? It's the what. But those checklists, are those checklists human factored? Are those checklists actually, crafted in a way to ensure that the person really understands how to do it? Or are those checklists primarily crafted to just capture the critical data needed to ensure the asset is maintained? My understanding is that the way most people use checklists is what I just described, right? You're just collecting the critical data points to ensure the asset is maintained. But it's not really guiding people through how to accurately and properly and safely perform that work. This is the difference, the what and the how. So problems with standard operating procedure programs. Again, I came from a program that was paper-based. With paper-based procedure management programs, are any of y'all still on like a paper-based program or using SharePoint? When I say paper-based, like Word documents, SharePoints, and everything like that. It's great, isn't it? I bet you're loving life, huh? Just enjoying it. No, certainly not the reason you're here today. That's the system I was on too. So I've got a bunch of different problems here, and I'm not one of these people to read all these bullet points on the slide. I'm sure you'll get a copy of it and everything. I'm just going to speak to you honestly and tell you what I dealt with. So a number of the problems that happen with a paper-based procedural process, which by the way, I ended up becoming the procedure compliance supervisor at my site, so I got very intimate with all of this, is number one, just the administrative overhead that goes into the entire process, right? So whenever you create a Word document and you type a sentence in a Word document, where does that sentence live? In that Word document, right? Only in that Word document. Now, if that sentence is a universal shared statement that would also be applicable across 1,000 other Word documents, what is the process if something changes in that universal statement? You're going to Control F on 1,000 documents, right? I've been there, I've done that. Did that for 10,000 documents with a change that had to be made on one single statement, right? So you've got administrative overhead as far as the way that procedures are authored, but then you've also got a big problem whenever it comes down to how do procedures live? What does the actual life cycle management system for procedures actually look like? So for instance, an operator goes and they have to search on SharePoint, and they find that procedure, they print it out, and then if it's a procedure that they're supposed to do in hand, right, they go out into the field, they've got paper, it's flapping around, it gets rained on, it gets destroyed, right? They're checking stuff off and everything, and then what should happen is when it gets done, they should turn it into you so that you have a record that took place, and then you've got to scan it, and you got to put it on SharePoint, and you just end up with this giant, pile and monster of paperwork. The data that was collected in the paper-based process is not usable at that point, right? It only exists on that piece of paper. It doesn't really do you any good after the fact. On top of that, if I go out and I'm an operator, this was a big problem where I worked. If I go out and I'm an operator and I'm doing the procedure and I notice that there's things in the procedures that need to be corrected, well, I'm supposed to redline it, right? I'm supposed to mark it and say, hey, this is wrong, correct this. Then I turn it into somebody, and that somebody just has this black hole that goes to the other side of the universe where that document that was supposed to, those changes that I took all the time to suggest are supposed to get incorporated. But it can be months and months before that actually takes place, just because of the sheer overhead of it. Well, now, from the operation standpoint, what just happened? Do you think if I've got to go out next week and do the same procedure that I'm going to take the time to redline it and follow what our established guidelines say I should be doing, you think I'm going to do that? And after I've experienced that enough times where I've provided feedback and my feedback wasn't incorporated in a timely manner and everything, what do you think happens to my level of trust in the overall program? What do you think happens to my level of trust in the procedural process itself? This is where, Chris, I'm going to tell you what the procedure says, and then I'm going to show you how we actually do it. That's why that happens, right? So there's a number of problems with a traditional procedural process, especially a paper-based process, but I'm going to show you all the ways that Accelerator KMS can be a great solution for you. So again, in a traditional process, you may be dealing with Word documents. Then you have like a review process where you're sending out emails for people, hey, review this, give us your feedback, let's go back and forth, right? It's a big mess. Then you may have SharePoint, flows that you're actually using, approval flows, or maybe you've set up Power Automate flows, to get different approvals on things. And then when it comes down to the way work is actually performed, again, a lot of times that's a very antiquated process. It's not mobile ready, right? It's like hard for them to access a SharePoint document from their phone or from a tablet or whatever. May not be actionable at that point, meaning they can't really interact with it via the tablet. Accelerator KMS actually ties all of that together. So Accelerator KMS ties in the process of authoring, reviewing and approving, managing and updating, and having a great field user experience all into one application. So the impact of procedural optimization, organizations will typically, who actually invest in this process, and especially those who are going from a paper-based, traditional model into a full digital model with Accelerator KMS, some of the impacts, that they realize is speed and accuracy of procedural administration. I just described the problem statement for you there a little bit. I'll show you how with Accelerator KMS, if I'm an end user and I go out and I'm using a piece of content and I say, hey, there's something that needs to change here, I can make one comment on that piece of content, automatically kick off a workflow, and start the process of reviewing it directly from my actions in the field. It's pretty amazing. I'm going to show you that. So drastic reduction in procedure administration related work. Reduced risk of process safety and events and recordable incidents. Now, there's a number of reasons that you will actually see a reduced risk. It's because, number one, if people trust the process, right? If they trust the program that you put in front of them to use, and they're using it, they're actually doing work in a way that's going to reduce their risk naturally, right? Because they're actually following a guide that's supposed to help them do the work safely. So that number one. But number two, I'm going to show you some features and functionality that Accelerator KMS will allow you to utilize to transform your procedures, true transformation, just through the feature set that actually makes work safer. So things like anytime that you're creating and you're crafting a procedure, one of your goals should be to reduce the cognitive load placed on the end user. And what do I mean by that? Look, I was a field operator. I'm not throwing shade at anybody, okay? I'm putting myself in this bucket. Field operators, right? So just watch them try to use a phone sometimes. That's what we're dealing with, okay? Now, so when we're talking let's reduce cognitive load, what I mean is workers are workers. They aren't readers. When they're in the process of working, they are working. So when you put a procedure in front of them that's a block of text this big, and within that block of text, there may be 5 or 6 separate actions that they're supposed to perform. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to read that first line and be like, okay, I think I know what to do from here, right? With Accelerator KMS, I'll show you how it's designed from the ground up to maximize human performance. So just through the feature set and functionality of the program, of the platform, you're going to reduce risk. And then again, speed and accuracy and consistency in procedure completions in the field. So let me ask you this. Do y'all believe in accountability through visibility? Anybody believe in that concept? You understand what I mean by that? Do you believe that if people believe their actions are visible to their supervisors or other workers or people who are responsible for managing them, do you believe that if they know my actions are visible to these people, that they are more likely to do the right thing or less likely to do the right thing? I'm a strong believer in accountability through visibility. Whenever you go digital, and I'm going to show you what a digital completion looks like, and work is recorded, and somebody knows, okay, yeah, if I print out this piece of paper, I can go out here in the field. Again, I was an operator, I know, right? It's like, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and stick this in my back pocket, perform 20 steps, and then I'll check all those steps off after the fact, right? Nobody will know. I'm out here by myself. Well, in Accelerator KMS, when I do the work, I'll show you how each step is the action is recorded by who completed it. It's time stamped, right? So just knowing that, like, hey, what I'm doing, somebody can actually look at it and they can see whether or not I'm pencil whipping this thing. I believe that that drives accountability. Just the fact of knowing that there's visibility in the system. So Accelerator KMS excels at that. All right, hey, I got to teach faster or y'all got to listen faster. One of the two, y'all. Which is it going to be? All right, I'm going to speed up. Okay, so there are a number of benefits with the Accelerator KMS. Some are quantitative, some are qualitative. Again, I'm not going to read every bullet on the screen, but I'll tell you, we have some powerful data, actually showing the savings. So 95% reduction in man hours when reviewing procedures. Let me tell y'all, I will vouch for that from the customer side. The process in which Accelerator KMS allows you to review and update procedures is it's not even a comparison to the process that you're probably utilizing today if you're utilizing a legacy procedure program. 99% increase in procedure adherence to compliance. 99% adherence. Why? Because now it's not optional for them to follow that and for them to do a completion the way that the work is written, right? It's actually driving that accountability. 83% reduction in subject matter expert time as far as reviewing the actual procedure, providing valuable input to the procedure. 30% elimination of redundant content in training manuals. So I don't have time to talk about it in depth today, but Accelerator KMS has a companion module called Accelerator LXP. My colleague right there, Eric Young, he's going to be here the rest of today and tomorrow. If y'all look at him, that handsome man right there, we're basically twins. But he's going to be here, and he's here just to walk you through those things. So if you want to see LXP, if you want to see more about Accelerator KMS that I can't show today, make sure to get with Eric Young. But Accelerator LXP is actually designed to work in tandem with Accelerator KMS, since your operating procedures are the source of truth for how work is going to be performed, and in a lot of legacy training programs, you're duplicating content from your procedures to put it in your training manuals. Well, with Accelerator LXP, we came up with a really ingenious way to say, hey, let's not duplicate content anymore. Let's keep the source of truth, and change the way that people interact with it to make it learning content. So, really cool. Interesting concept. If you want to know more about that, talk with Eric. So, moving along, a couple of the features that I actually want to show here, and I had a nightmare scenario in the last conference I did where I couldn't get internet to work at all. Normally, I like to do this live, so I got some GIFs in here, all right? But what you're seeing on the screen right now is Accelerator KMS is designed primarily to put the right information in front of the right people at the right time, or at the time of need, right? That's what people like to say. So what you're actually seeing is with Accelerator KMS, what an operator can do is if they're actually looking for work that they're going to perform, they can go in and they can utilize a quick search functionality, which is going to work very similar to like Google search, where they just search based on a keyword, and it's going to give a predictive list of all of the content that could be what they're looking for. Obviously, the more that they type in, the more narrow the search results are going to get, right? So instead of an operator having to navigate to a SharePoint site, drill down the hierarchy, of the SharePoint site, try to get to the right thing, download it and everything. In just a couple seconds, they do a quick search, boom, they're right at the content that they're looking for there. In addition to that, Accelerator KMS is designed in a way that when I say we put the right information in front of the right people at the right time, Accelerator KMS utilizes the system called domains, where with the domains in combination with the roles that people get assigned, we only show the content that's relevant to the end user to them. So you may have 10,000 pieces of content in your environment, but let's just say what's your name? Eduardo? Okay. Could you have an easier name for me to say? Okay, Mike. Thank you, Mike. So Mike over here. No. So Eduardo. So let's just say Eduardo, he's an operator in Unit 1, Section 2, right? He's a field operator, and on top of that, he's also an SME reviewer. Well, in your environment, you may have, operators working in 10 different units. You may have mechanics, maintenance people. You may have I&E people. You may have engineers. You have all these people with these different roles and everything. But the only content that's actually relevant to Eduardo is the content associated with operators and SMEs in Unit 1, Section 2. So we can create these domains and we can give him the appropriate roles so that whenever he searches for content, he's only going to get what's relevant to him. So it eliminates, confusion around like documents and things like that. I love the quick search functionality. I think it's fantastic. I'm going to break some of this down, but just so you understand at a high level the anatomy of a digital procedure and some of what makes it different from a legacy system is number one, I just said it a second ago, but we actually have role-based statements. And I'm going to use that term statements, and I'm going to explain more about that here in just a little bit. But in our procedures, you can have different roles who have certain steps within the procedure, right? So say, for instance, you've got a procedure where you've got a console operator working from the control room who has certain steps that they're having to do, and then you've got field operators working out in the field who have certain steps. Instead of having to describe, okay, this step is for this person or this step is for that person, we actually have a mechanism where you can create those steps or those statements and assign them to a role. And not only does it make it clear on who should be performing that step, but there are actually controls in place as well where, let's say again, Eduardo is a console operator, but he's not a field operator anymore because he's forgotten everything he knows from the field, because that's what happens, all right? So he's a console operator, but he's not a field operator. He would only be able to complete the steps that are assigned to the console operator, not the field operator. So he actually has to have that role in there. And again, I'll show you a GIF of how this works. But we've got role-based completions. We've got an interactive table of contents, so you can navigate to that table of contents and you can click on anything in it, immediately jump to that portion of the procedure. We've got branch statements, and I'm going to show you a GIF on that as well, which allow us to have logic. Oftentimes, if you've seen people complete a procedure out in the field, sometimes there'll be a whole section of, hey, does this condition exist, right? Like, are you bypassing the tank? And if they say no, then they've got like 30 steps that they have to NA, right? It's so annoying. It's the worst. Well, in Accelerator KMS, you can just craft your statement in a way that says, hey, does this condition exist? If you say no, it checks it off and you move right on to the next appropriate and applicable step in the process. So again, I'll show you how that works. Everything that's done in Accelerator KMS, from each time somebody starts a completion, and when I'm saying completion, think of that as a procedure execution, right? That's the term that we use for completions. So I'm going to get this procedure and I'm going to go out and I'm going to perform it. I'm going to execute on this procedure. We call that a completion. Well, every time somebody starts a new completion, it creates a unique record of that completion. So you've got a historical record of all the work that's been performed, who was part of that work. In addition to that, each step that is completed, again, it shows who completed the step, the person, the role and the person and the time in which it was completed. And then there's a complete auditable history of the entire life cycle of that piece of content as well. So from the day it's created, so from inception, it will tell you who authored it, who reviewed it, who approved it. Then when it gets updated, it'll tell you who made comments, who updated it, when it does all that for you automatically as you naturally work in the system. So a lot of times with like a traditional procedure-based process, at the end of the procedure, you'll have this big old long sheet that has kind of like the record of changes, you know? And it's like, on this day, we changed this statement. On this day, Accelerator KMS does all that stuff for you. It's all part of it. Auditors, I actually went through an audit right at the end of my career at the chemical plant before coming to work for Accelerator. I went through an audit, and Accelerator KMS was recognized in best in class, meaning that for the company that I worked for, which owns a lot of different companies, it was the best procedure management system that they had seen across any of the companies that they'd audited in our network. So, yeah, auditors love it. Actually, as a matter of fact, as I was going through the audit, I was so excited to just show like, oh, I can show this, I can show this, I can show this. The auditor was like, I don't need to see anymore. I feel confident that you know, the bases are covered. Literally, they told me that. All right. So, as I said, everything that we create in Accelerator KMS is created with human performance in mind. So what you're seeing in this GIF here are a couple things. So number one, notice there's a lot of white space. Anybody see that? You don't have big blocks of text. Now don't get me wrong, you as an author have the ability to create a giant block of text if you want to, but that's part of what we try to guide you through, right? Is the right way to actually do this. So you've got a lot of white space. The design, the UI is actually designed to make it easy for people to comprehend their next immediate step. You'll see there's a little new flag up there. It tells us that this procedure is published, and that new flag actually is telling me as an end user, hey, something has changed on this procedure since the last time you accessed it. You need to scroll through, and anywhere those changes take place, you would also have that new flag. So you'll be able to say, oh, this is new. And then on top of that, since most companies have a requirement that if you're an affected user of a procedure, right, meaning that you're one of the people that actually uses that procedure to perform work, if something changes in it, you need to be notified that there was a change, and they need to have a record that you were notified of the change, you understood the change, right? So like where I worked, we would have to print out copies of procedures and send around, and everybody would have to read it and sign off on it. Then you get the sign-in sheets back, and you'd have to, you know, scan them in and everything, right? It's just a huge pain. In Accelerator KMS, we take all of that, and we actually pare that down to the individual. So now, you can immediately push out a change on a procedure. You don't have to wait for everybody that's affected to sign it before you can push out the change. You can immediately push out a change, and then the next time that affected user accesses that procedure, they're going to be notified that it's new. And then at the bottom of the procedure, there's going to be a button that says acknowledge it. When they click that button and say, I've read, I understand the changes, I'm acknowledging it, you just created that record that you notified them, they understood it, and you can show that again through an audit trail and everything. So it actually takes the acknowledgement process and puts it into the hands of the individual, ties all that up. Another thing I'll point out to you is notice there's a warning statement right here. That warning statement in Accelerator KMS, you can create certain different types of statements. So let's just say that an actionable step, right? Something like close the valve. That is what we would call a procedural step, right? Somebody's going to take action on that. Well, in Accelerator KMS, we can create a statement type called a procedural step. Anytime somebody says, I'm going to create a new procedural step, it's automatically going to create it in a way where it's going to have a little checkbox. You're going to have to assign what role is this procedural step associated to. It's always going to be the same, right? Anytime a procedural step is created, it's going to look the same, it's going to work the same, right? And you have a lot of flexibility with the type of statements you can create. The same applies to things like your warning and caution statements. And let me tell you, when I talk about reducing cognitive load, this is one area where I saw it huge where I worked, and I've seen it in a number of our clients. Y'all may see it too, those of you who are still on these paper-based systems. If you were to go from one business unit to another business unit, do you think all of your warnings would look the same in your procedures? Would one person maybe be like, I'm going to make this bold yellow, and another person be like, I'm going to make this red, and another person be like, I'm going to put a box around it. Does that sound familiar at all? No consistency, right? No consistency at all. Well, what's the problem with that? Again, I'm a worker, right? I'm a worker. I'm not a reader. And we need to create mechanisms and triggers so that when people see something, they immediately recognize it, right? Without having to think too hard about it. So in this system, every time you create a warning in Accelerator KMS, depending on how you design your warning statement, it's going to have that red box with red text. So without even having to think about it, every time I go to a procedure and I see a warning, I know, hey, that warning means there's a risk to life and safety, right? Or catastrophic failure that could cause life and safety, right? Or I know whenever I see yellow, that's going to be a caution. That means there's a risk to really damage the equipment or potentially shut the system down. However you define those to be in your industry, the point is every time somebody sees it, they don't even have to think about it. They immediately know what that red means. They immediately know what that yellow means, right? And if you make them meaningful, when they see that red, instead of just skipping over it like, oh, it could be another node, it's not something, it becomes meaningful to them to where they know, oh, okay, I see red, I need to pay attention to that. Let's stop and look at it, right? Again, as I talked about, we've got role-based completion. So here's an example of me starting a new completion. You can see I've got two different roles in that system. I have two roles as console operator and field operator. Whenever I start a new completion, I can select the role or roles that I am actually acting in as I do that completion. So in this case, I started that as a field operator right there. You'll see right there again. So I'm going to say, oh, the console operator, sorry. So I'm a console operator, and as I scroll down now through the completion, you'll see that there are steps associated for a field operator, console operator, and I now have the ability to check off the console operator steps. Again, completed by Chris Guerra a few seconds ago. As you can see there, every step is recorded in the process. Now, what's really great about this is not only do we have role-based completions, but we have collaborative work, okay? So this is what we call collaborative completions, and it can be done from any device. So this is actually, that's my phone there, recording it. So on the right-hand side, what you're seeing is somebody acting as the field operator joining from their phone out in the field the same completion. So now we have two people, a console operator and a field operator working in the same completion to complete the work. So there's a couple cool things going on in that there. So I'm demonstrating how easy it is to join a new completion right there. When I navigate to the procedure, I can see the active completions. I can join it. The screen on the left will update that I joined it as well. And then as I scroll down, you can see the two people who are doing it. And then one thing I want you to see is one of our cool statement types that we have. It's actually a scan statement. It says scan the barcode. I open up my camera, I scan the QR code, and it checks that statement off there. I think people really like this one who are in asset management. The barcode that I scanned there was actually from John with OneOak, by the way, because they have all their assets. They have QR codes on all their assets. So this is one way. If, say, you've got somebody that's going to go perform a critical procedure on a critical asset, right? And you want to ensure as a first step they are on the right asset. Well, you could create a statement that says, hey, scan the barcode, to ensure that you're on the right asset, right? Or if you've got a critical valve or something like that. And they literally cannot check off that step and progress without skipping it, without scanning the right QR code or barcode. So it's really cool. I like that a lot. Accelerator KMS also has powerful data capture technology built into it. So we actually call them data collection statements in Accelerator KMS. There are a number of different data collection statements that can be created and utilized. What I'm showing in this demonstration here is the first one. We can create either multi-select or single select data collection statements. So a single select data collection statement would be as an author, I can say, hey, select one of the following, as your answer. What valve are you what pump are you starting up? 1, 2, or 3? You have to select one of those. I'm starting up pump 1, and it records that step there. Or if you're saying what pumps are you starting up, you can select multiple options within that. So multiple different data collection type statements. Again, there's like 5 or 6 different data collection statement types, I think now. Yeah, 5. So again, Eric can show you those in more detail if you want to see all those. But in addition to that, I explained this earlier, we also have branching logic. So you can create branch statements that can allow you to create a logical path within the procedure. So for instance, like I said, imagine that you've got a series of conditions that could or could not be applicable to the current procedure that you're completing. Maybe that procedure is a startup procedure. And with that startup procedure, you have two different conditions that you could be starting from. You could be starting from a cold shutdown, or you could be starting from a hot startup, right? That's two conditions. Well, one thing that you could do is you could actually create a branch statement in the beginning of the procedure and say, are you starting from cold shutdown? Yes or no. If it's yes, then here are all the steps that you go through from the cold shutdown. If it's no, then you move straight on to the hot shutdown procedure there. So some really cool stuff that you can do with that. They actually just enhance the branch statement functionality to allow you to have different answers based on yes and no. And I think there's a lot of potential for how that's going to be enhanced even further in the future. As I told you early on, one of the things that I get most excited about is the ability to actually enhance procedures with layers of information, including visual content. So you can see we've got an image right there embedded. There's like 4 or 5 different ways that you can actually embed images. Here I kind of did a little inception thing. I've got a GIF inside of my GIF. So this is an example of how I actually used a GIF in a procedure. You can do that. Which I think is really cool, right? If there's something that for instance, you say like, open the block valve, 3/4 turns or whatever, right? You could have a GIF kind of showing exactly what that looks like if you wanted to there, if it was something critical. So again, images, videos, hyperlinks. So if you've got, videos that are actually exist out somewhere else, you actually have the ability to even embed videos directly within the procedure now through HTML embeds. So if you've got a video that's out on YouTube or Microsoft Stream and it's hosted there, but you want somebody to be able to play it right there in their procedure, you can do that now. So lots of powerful stuff that you can do to really enhance your procedures. I get super excited about that. In addition to that, I think I show in this one here, you see this more details? Oh, sorry, right below it. I've got this more details right here. And this is another layer of information that I authored into that statement. So with more details, let's just say we always want to keep the work at the forefront, right? So the primary task here is place the start switch in the on position. Now, an experienced operator knows what that means, but maybe a less experienced operator needs to know a little bit more information. The switch is near beam 1305, right? So now we don't have to put that in there and clutter up the main procedure, but you've got an extra layer of information there if somebody needs it. So I love that. Again, I'm just barely touching the tip of the iceberg with what you can do with the system. Honestly, make sure and talk to Eric. Again, I mentioned earlier how with a true procedural lifecycle management system, the aim should be for it to be a living document. So you want continuous improvement, and you want the people who use that content to feel like owners in the content. How do we do that? Well, let's give them a mechanism for whenever they find something in the procedure that's not right, that they can provide feedback and action can be immediately taken on it. So you can see it's as simple as they go over there, can add a new comment, they describe what is wrong with it, they can describe what it should be changed to be here. You'll see, it says Chris Guerra just made a new comment, here's what it is. The moment that they make that comment, you have the ability to create your own workflows in Accelerator KMS and say, hey, when somebody makes this type of comment, automatically kick off a workflow and send it to this person to be reviewed so that we can review that and incorporate it, right? When you do that, the first time, I'm going to tell you right now, Eric can back me up on this. The first time your operators, I don't care if they've been there 130 years, okay? And they're crusty and, old and just, they hate technology and everything. The first time that they see, I made a comment, it kicked off a workflow, and, a few days later or a week later, my comment was incorporated. You've got them. You've got them. They're bought in. Even the most cynical. Again, customizable workflows and notifications. So what I'm showing you right there is I made that comment and it automatically kicked off a workflow right here. So action has already started, right? It's happening. It's going to the right people. It's going to get reviewed and people can take action on it there. It also sent out an email to whoever it is that's the first step in the workflow and says, hey, there's a new comment here, FYI, and from that email it's got a link that they can go and take action on right there to start the process. So it's incredibly intuitive, incredibly fast, and again, it turns your content into a living document. As I said before, it's also got a clean and intuitive authoring interface as well as a user interface, because we want the process of authoring to be simple and easy as well. So you can see here, I'm acting on that comment that I made where I actually said, hey, MSDS needs to be changed to SDS. Well, now I'm the author, a workflow has been kicked off, I'm going to go in and I'm going to make that change. It's as simple as clicking edit, going in and making the change. Adding new statements, I add a statement, I select the statement type, I assign the role to it if it's an actionable statement, and I can type it in right there. So very simple, very easy. As I said before, we also try to leverage single source authoring. So Accelerator KMS is what's called a content component management system. There are actually 4 pillars of Accelerator KMS. It's Procedural Lifecycle Management System, Content Component Management System, Connected Worker Platform, and a Learner Experience Platform. Okay, those are the 4 pillars. This one, you know, as a Content Component Management System, what I did was that statement, change MSDS to SDS. This is my real life, what I went through when I talked about 10,000 procedures where I had to Control F. I was the procedure compliance supervisor whenever that standard changed, and we had to remove any reference to MSDS down in, you know, Texas. I think it was the same everywhere else. And I literally went through 10,000 documents and Control F for everywhere MSDS was to remove one letter. And Accelerator KMS, because it's built on a content component management system, I can create that universal statement being reference MSDS, and that one single statement is used across multiple procedures. And if I go and change that one statement, because it's a universal statement, it can push out that change and reflect the change across all of the procedures it's used in. You want to talk about massively cutting down on administrative overhead. Powerful feature, right? Got to be used wisely, right? Like Peter Parker, you know, great power comes great responsibility, but it's amazing. This is just kind of a look to help you understand what I'm talking about when I talk about the content component management system. Earlier I talked about if you type a statement in a Word document, where does it live? It lives in the Word document. In Accelerator, if you create a statement in Accelerator, it goes into a statement database. That's where it lives. It lives in a statement database, and your documents or your procedures, think of those as containers that you populate with statements from the statement database, okay? So this is an example. Disable automatic pump start. This is the statement, and here's a look at 4 different procedures where that same statement is utilized. So then if I come in and I say, hey, something has changed, this is no longer an automatic pump, it's a manual pump, and it's applicable to all of these, I can go change it in one place and push out the change everywhere. It's really, really handy for, again, those warning statements, those caution statements and stuff. If you've got a risk, right? Let's just say you've got benzene. Is the warning for benzene going to be the same every time? Most likely the hazard, right? The hazard hasn't changed. It's going to be the same thing, right? Hey, this hazard exists. Here's how you mitigate it. Here's your PPE that you use. In Accelerator, you can create that one warning statement, use it everywhere that you want. It's consistent, it's reliable, and if anything ever changes with it, you can change it in one place, reflect it everywhere. And then lastly, Accelerator KMS also has powerful out-of-the-box dashboards and reporting functionality. So from the moment somebody logs in, the entire experience is customized to them. There's a lot of different dashboard widgets that are available to them based on their role and based on their access, okay? So whether you're an end user, whether you're a content administrator, the person responsible for making sure all your content stays up to date and everything, whether you're a supervisor actually monitoring the field work taking place in the field, there's a dashboard widget for you to help you see that work in full context that you need to. And in addition to that, when the dashboards and out-of-the-box reporting can't fit your use case, we have a powerful set of REST APIs that can be utilized to create whatever, you know, dashboards or reporting you're actually looking for. So, in a nutshell, Accelerator KMS is truly a complete procedural transformation package for you. There are plans. I'm not the authority to speak on the integration, plans as far as like how AKMS will exist alongside EAM, but I'll tell you, there are some really interesting, active, discussions taking place. There are plans. I believe that you're going to see the first, level of integration taking place later this year. Closer towards the summer and everything. That's about as much as I'll say about it. But yeah, I think it's really exciting how EAM and AKMS are going to be able to live together as we come closer to the future of a true digital reality. So with that said, I want to make sure I'm respectful to the next person who has to get up here and speak. Does anyone have any questions?